Mr. Alex has been living alone in the big house for 10 years now. His wife passed away 5 years ago. The entire village mourned her death. Mrs. Alfina was truly a woman of the world. After her demise, Mr. Alex was deeply affected. He suffered sleepless nights, wallpapering his walls with photos of his dearly beloved, departed wife. Everything around him reminded him of her. The man had been married twice, with a son from each marriage. His first son had recently died suddenly. He was just working when, unexpectedly, his heart failed him, and it was too late to save him. Mr. Alex's second son, Igor, had been living abroad for 10 years. He often visited his father, bringing gifts, food, and money, which the old man appreciated. Naturally gruff but good-natured, he was well remembered and loved. "Why do you call and spend money every day? I'm still alive. They'll let you know when I'm gone," Mr. Alex would say, laughing. He was brief on the phone, trying to save his son money and chiding him for his excessive attentiveness. "I work in the garden, read the newspapers, and watch TV," Mr. Alex would say about his leisure time. But he wasn't entirely truthful. Some time after his wife's death, neighbors started whispering about a mysterious woman who regularly visited him. At first, Igor didn't believe it, thinking people would eventually stop gossiping. However, rumors of the unknown lady persisted. Direct inquiries about her were met with evasive answers from his father. "Don't make things up, son, there's nobody, everything's fine," he would say, briefly calming Igor. But Igor was only truly convinced of the rumor's truth a year later. Due to border closures, he couldn't visit his father. Sending a parcel was the only option. "My wife and I have put together a small package for you, we'll send it in the next few days," Igor said hoarsely. "Why bother? All is well. I don't need anything. You've really outdone yourself with these parcels. Don't you have anything better to do?" his father protested. Igor managed to reassure him, but instead of hanging up, his father continued to complain to someone else. Then, Igor heard a woman's voice. "Why are you getting worked up? It's just a gift. Don't be mad." Disbelieving his ears, Igor decided to call another number for his father. A woman answered. Unperturbed, she said, "Hello. Who's this?" Stunned by what he heard, Igor hesitated, then called his father's number again. This time, an elderly man answered. "Son, what's wrong? Why have you been calling so much? I don't understand." "Dad, who was that woman who answered the phone? Has something changed in your personal life?" "What woman? What are you talking about? You must be mistaken. Nothing's changed. Everything's as it was. Don't make things up," his father replied and hung up. After this conversation, Igor was deeply troubled. He sat in his car, looking around for a long time before going inside. "Can you believe it? My father has met someone," he told his wife, nearly in tears. "Where did you get that idea?" "I've heard rumors." But now she actually answered the phone. "Who is she? What is she doing with my father?" Igor was angry and visibly upset. "I don't know. And you don't either. Right now, we can't do anything. The borders are closed. Once they open, you can go and find out everything," his wife replied. Meanwhile, the unknown lady lived in the old man's house. Her name was Larissa. She was nearly 6 years his junior. Her husband had died 3 years ago. She had a daughter and 2 grandchildren. After living without a man for a short while, she decided it was urgently necessary to find a strong male shoulder to lean on. It turned out she initially asked Mr. Alex to come over and do some household tasks, whether it was to fix a shelf or pick cherries. The lonely, elderly man was always glad to help. He was alone, bored, and lonely. In the company of such a lady, he felt needed and indispensable. "Oh, well done, just well done. You've done such work around the house for me. I would have struggled with it for a long time myself." "Thank you, Alex," she said tenderly. At these words, the elderly man just blushed and smiled awkwardly. After some time, Larissa began to treat him to pies, fresh pastries, and homemade noodles. She would visit the elderly man on any pretext. Soon, he grew very fond of her. Listen to what I'm going to say and don't interrupt. You're alone, and so am I. Maybe you should move in with me, if you don't mind. It's somehow more cheerful together, Mr. Alex told her one day. What are you talking about, Alex? I hadn't thought anything bad at all. Of course, I agree, with you I'll feel as safe as behind a stone wall. From that moment on, Larissa virtually moved into the old man's house. She was practically his wife, cooking, washing, cleaning, waiting for him from the store or market, always encouraging him. And she was always there. Visually, everything seemed fine between the old man and his new lady of the heart. But in reality, things were somewhat different. Igor began to notice more frequently that his father was in an inebriated state. He hardly spoke to him and tried to hang up the phone quickly. I don't understand what's happening. Father tells me nothing about his new passion. Meanwhile, he drinks more often and talks to me while drunk. I can't understand what's going on. Igor shared his worries with his wife. I think you're worrying unnecessarily. Everything will be fine. Even if your father found someone, isn't that good? Is it better for him to be alone? He's a normal and healthy man with natural needs. I'm glad that he has found a woman. She'll take care of him, and he won't be so lonely in the big house, Igor's wife replied. Yes, but I'm afraid that Dad, in a burst of passion, love, I don't know what he has with this woman, might do something foolish. But if you're really so worried, as soon as you can, go to him. In a personal meeting, you'll find out what's happening more quickly. Yes, of course, we decided on that. But time passed. A few months later, Igor finds out that his father decided to get married. Moreover, he personally hadn't told him anything. Struggling to digest this information, Igor called him to find out everything. Dad, what's happening with you? Your neighbor said that everything's good in your personal life. Moreover, they informed me that you intend to marry. Is that true or not? Look at these villains, telling everything. And why should anyone care? Well, yes, there's something going on. I've met someone. I want to marry. God, I can't believe it's true. Are you out of your mind? You're not a boy. What got into you? Don't be silly. Come to your senses. Better remember Mom. Go visit her grave. It hasn't been that long. Have you forgotten her so quickly? I haven't forgotten anyone. I remember everything. I visited Mother's grave a couple of weeks ago. Stop saying such things. You should be happy that I'm not alone anymore. With these words, the father hung up the phone. Unable to tolerate such a situation, Igor set off on a journey. The border was open only one way. He knew leaving the country would be easy. The problem would arise when he would be returning. Upon arriving in his homeland, Igor first went to see his father. There, he saw a cheerful woman bustling about in the garden. Meet Larissa, said the elderly man and smiled. Oh, you must be Igor? I've heard a lot. Nice to finally meet you. She extended her hand to the guest, still wearing a dirty glove. Igor looked at the hand with distaste and coughed. Dad, can I have a word with you? They stepped aside. Larissa continued to plant flowers in the flower bed near the house, glancing sideways at the conversants in the gazebo. What does all this mean? What are you doing? Listen. Son, I've been living alone for many years. A lot has changed during that time. I miss the warmth and affection of a woman. Larissa came into my life just in time. I feel her care and guardianship. That's enough for me. But don't you think she's with you not out of love? You have a decent miner's pension. Plus a small farmer's income. And the house, after all. Have you thought about that? Igor, the father laughed. She's a wonderful woman. She is kind, gentle. I can't say anything bad about her. But watch out, Dad, keep your eyes open. I don't like her. If you want to know my opinion, I'm against your relationship. And who said I'm interested in your opinion? Or do you want me to be alone until my dying day? Praying to your mother's portraits? Yes, I loved her, but she's dead, do you understand? She's not here anymore, and I'm a living person. Leave, don't push me to sin. Please, leave. The elderly man pointed towards the door with a trembling hand. Not believing his ears, Igor left the house and walked to his mother-in-law's house. She greeted him with open arms. Grinding his teeth, he told her the bitter truth about his father. She just shrugged in despair and sighed heavily. Don't worry so much, everything will be okay. Your father is no boy. He knows what's best for him. Old fool, Igor couldn't help but say. The next day, he called a friend who used to work in the police. His friend checked on Larissa through his channels. Unfortunately, I can't say anything about your request. I have nothing on your Larissa. She wasn't previously detained or convicted. I don't know what you don't like about her. Be glad that your father is not alone, his friend reported over the phone. Thanks for the information. I'll manage without your advice, Igor snapped back. Igor shared his concerns with his wife. Listen to my advice. Tell your father you're going back home. Let your Larissa think you've left. We'll see what she intends to do next. And so they did. That very evening, Igor came to say goodbye to his father. The elderly man was drunk. He passively accepted his son's departure. He patted him on the shoulder, gathered gifts for the grandchildren, and went into the living room to watch TV. Let's see what you're going to do now, knowing that I've supposedly left, Igor thought. Then, he rented a car and started surveilling his father's house. In an instant, Igor turned into a character from some detective or spy story. All week, he watched as Larissa plied his father with alcohol. She bought it herself and kept offering it to him, topping up his glass whenever it was empty. Why is she trying to get my father drunk? What is she aiming for? Igor pondered aloud, but couldn't find any answers. Once, he saw Larissa leaving the house early in the morning. Following her, he managed to catch her at the notary's office. She entered briefly, but came out carrying some documents in a folder. What could this be? What is this woman up to? Igor wondered. The answer came with the nightfall. When Larissa and the elderly man entered the house, Igor slipped in and hid behind a window. Larissa was bustling around and setting the table. Igor's father staggered into the room. There, he's drunk already, Igor thought, peeking carefully into the room. Larissa and Mr. Alex sat down to eat. They had dinner and drank a lot. And when the elderly man could hardly comprehend anything anymore, Larissa slid some documents in front of him. He looked at them uncomprehendingly and then buried his face back onto the table. What is this woman doing? With those words, Igor turned on his camera to record what was happening on his phone. Without hesitation, Larissa placed a pen in his hand and nudged the significantly intoxicated homeowner. Then, she pointed to where he should sign and made sure the elderly man complied with her request. Eventually, the document was signed by Igor's father. To be completely sure, Larissa carefully examined the document and let out a cry of joy. Then, she called someone. A few minutes later, a car pulled up. A middle-aged man was behind the wheel. As soon as he honked once, Larissa immediately rushed out to him with 2 sports bags and a folder of documents under her arm. The man got out with an air of importance and helped Larissa load her things into the trunk. And who might this be? Igor mused aloud and noted the car's license plate. The car drove away. At the same time, Igor called his friend, relayed the new details, and gave the mysterious car's plate number. His friend promised to find out whatever he could. In the morning, when Mr. Alex woke up, he had a terrible headache. He got up from the table, looked around the house, and to his surprise, couldn't find Larissa. Walking through the rooms, he also couldn't find her belongings. While the elderly man, confused, looked around, an unfamiliar person appeared at the door. As it turned out, yesterday Mr. Alex, without realizing it, sold his house to a mysterious buyer. According to the stranger, skillfully displaying the contract with the bewildered old man's signature, he was also obliged to vacate the house within 3 working days. At that moment, Igor received a call from his acquaintance. "I have good news and bad news. I finally found out something about your mysterious Larissa. It turns out she's Olga. Besides a daughter, she also had a son named Stanislav. Many years ago, when he had just started working in the mine, a tragedy occurred. A cage with people got stuck during the descent into the mine. There were rumors that Mr. Alex, who was operating the lift, was drunk at the time and didn't notice the stoppage of the cage. Stanislav came to replace him and heard some noise. A work cable failure occurred. The cage overturned, and along with the miners, fell down. People died. And when it was time to find those responsible, instead of the experienced and respected miner, the blame for criminal negligence fell on the young Stanislav. He was sentenced to imprisonment. Unable to bear the shame, the young man took his own life. Olga decided to avenge her son's death. She blamed Mr. Alex for everything. By deceit, she deprived him of his home and was preparing to turn his life into hell. But Igor suspected something was wrong in time. After informing his friend about everything, he immediately went to the police. The problem was quickly resolved. Olga, aka Larissa, was brought to the station, where she confessed to everything immediately after Igor's video. Upon returning to his father's house, Igor didn't tell him anything. The old man was delighted to see his son. He told him the sad news about the strange disappearance of his Larissa. "Strange somehow. She packed her things and left. It didn't explain anything to me." "It's all right, Dad, everything will be fine. There are plenty more Larissas out there for you. You're still quite something. Just stop drinking. Alcohol never led anyone to good," said Igor, winking at Alex. Both men looked at each other for a long time, then shed a few manly tears and hugged each other tightly. It's good they had each other. At each other.